podcast.
And welcome to our inaugural episode of Balls Out, the podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Madden. I'm joined with Doug Phillips and Bob Arthur. Do you want Bob or do you want Robert?
Bob works.
Okay. Then we're doing Bob.
Or do you just want to keep going by Dr. Balls?
We can roll that too. That way our fans across the whole world, the internet, can associate with our program.
Robert/Bob, Dr. Balls, Arthur.
Oh, yeah. I like it.
I love it. Sir. I think there needs to be a sir in there somewhere.
That's why I feel Sir Madden, the man, the myth, the legend, the reverend, here on Balls Out, the podcast. We're going to talk a lot about rock and roll and all kinds of forms of music because we love it.
Yeah, I wanted to start off with Himalayan throat singing.
All right, give us an example. If I'm going to one of the last record stores that you can still find, what am I looking for?
That would probably be a Tower. I think Tower bought all the other ones up.
No. I mean, what am I looking for? What am I looking for in the record store?
No, they won't sell that there. This is you have to buy this on vinyl from the village that it was performed in, and you have to pay in their currency, which I believe is the turtle shell.
Oh, I like that.
So I haven't been able, because I haven't been to the Himalayas. We know this. I'm not gonna put on airs for this show.
All right, so a couple things. Tina Turner is no longer with us.
Tina Turner passed away. That is absolute passing of a legend, and a really. I don't know if anybody's been hanging out on social media today, but there's also been a lot of conversation about Ike Turner as well, because it's very hard to talk about Tina Turner and the trajectory that her career took without at least bringing Ike up. Because Ike, was kind of the one that found that diamond in the rough and polished her off and put her in the studio and really started developing her into the star that she eventually became. How he did that, however.
Yeah, that's another story for another podcast.
There's a whole movie about it. You just go watch the one with that pretty girl. What was her name? Angela Bassett.
Yeah, but I want to go ahead and make it. I want to go ahead and make it clear when we finally do get around to covering this, it's going to be a lot more interesting than the fucking movie.
Oh yeah. And the thing about it is that her talent was so great that she usurped and she rose higher than the man who had the first rock and roll song, Ike Turner, Rocket 88. In my opinion, that's the first rock and roll song, Rocket 88.
It's definitely one of them. It's arguable because there's a lot of shit. A lot of people would even say that Hank Williams might have put the first rock and roll song out. But Rocket 88 was definitely something totally different. As far
as a lot of performers from that era can kind of make that claim a little bit because their albums were all being, kind of pushed in and around the same time. And some of them, by the time that the music had caught up or the scene had caught up, these were, songs that they had performed or written and performed for several years now. So they got to identify their music into what was going on.
What's everybody's definition of rock and roll? To me, it's like big band with less instruments.
Oh,
that's how it started anyway.
That's how a lot of people approach guitar, so that makes us a very interesting way to look at it. Like Alex Lifeson, what I learned from him and what he has to say is that I'm playing full chords so I can fill up all the instruments I need. Instead of just a power chord, I'm going to play as big and rich as I can so I can fill up all the spaces on the EQ, But, that's interesting. To me, the reason that I like Rocket 88 is I could see Elvis Presley in 1953 driving his truck around Memphis, hearing that song on the radio, said, "Oh, this is what I want to do," right?
Or you could actually have been riding around with him down, when he had kind of went down south a little bit and hung out in New Orleans and saw him watching Professor Longhair and all that crazy music that was going on there. So again, and it's not just limited to one particular genre. That was rock and roll is when it really brought everybody, and I mean everybody in this country together. Because you had men, you had women, you had black, you had white, you had just about people coming from every single socioeconomic class to these shows just to hang loose, and just didn't matter who else was there for once.
That's why Tina Turner was transcendent talent, right? Because she went right to the top of that, fell off for a while and then come back and was even bigger. Have y'all ever seen the video of her doing a mountain? What is it? River Deep Mountain High.
Oh man.
Oh my
I know which
God.
one I know which one you're talking about, and it just they tear the whole entire roof off the building and just
Oh yeah.
throw it at the audience. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, the dance, and see that's what people don't get about people like Tina Turner and James Brown, right? If you're just listening to them on an MP3, you don't understand that them guys were dancing in ways that Michael Jackson would be jealous of, right?
And when they broke the scene, when they actually came out and performed those audiences had never seen performances like that. They
No,
had seen
no.
bits and pieces here and there in cabaret and vaudeville, but nothing as up close and in your face as the music that Ike and Tina and James Brown, which were pretty much your two main icons of R&B slash the early days of rock and roll when
Oh
they
yeah,
broke
they're
the scene.
on the
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore. Those people are on the Mount Rushmore of American music in general, in my opinion. Right? Even if you don't like Ike Turner, his contributions are deep, you know. But so, Tina got even bigger than
Hell of a fucking guitar player. Oh my God, he's an amazing guitar player. And I
and
mean,
bass.
a lot of people can argue, along with several other people of that era, Chuck Berry, for example,
Oh yeah.
that, they were the ones that taught these young white kids how to do it right.
Oh yeah.
You
Well, you
know,
know it's true. It all comes from all that Delta blues and stuff like that, mixing with the hillbilly stuff from up here. People go to Memphis. Don't you pee on my porch, dog?
That
They-
reminds me of a question somebody asked me one time. It was in one of those crazy groups that ended up getting taken down. That had such, kind of like I guess Unguided is now.
yeah.
Unguided is not really that bad, but anyway, somebody asked, what would be different if blacks never came to the U.S.?
it wouldn't be rich. The
One of the
tax.
first fucking things that come to my mind is, or if the whole black culture didn't exist,
Oh, there'd be no rock and roll, man.
the music.
Yeah.
I mean, we would have a massive different music than we've got now.
Yeah.
Massively.
So they took any instrument they could get their hands on, right? When they played them, and then they done something completely different on them, right? And then it evolved into stuff that is now Americana, right? So I mean, if you
And
make
a lot of them started on non-traditional instruments that they had to fashion
yeah,
into, kind of what they were doing. It's like Jimi Hendrix, his first instrument was a rake. He would pick up a rake and emulate playing a guitar on it when he was a little
oh yeah,
kid. And his dad finally took some pity on him and actually bought him, I think, an old Silvertone or one of those type guitars from the day. One of those you have to pay a little bit on layaway at Sears for.
I got one of them in my car from 1966. I paid $20 for it. Now,
Okay. So before I forget, speaking of rock and roll legends, we have tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of Ronnie James Dio's Holy Diver album coming out,
oh,
Oh, wow.
and that's a big deal because he brought Sabbath, like I did in a post. He brought Sabbath to platinum status, and then him and Ami got into it, which I think was a bad move on Ami's part.
Oh,
Because
absolutely. Oh my God. Think of if Dio, instead of breaking off on his own, had just stayed with
and Dio
Sabbath
was
and
that,
ran
and
that
Dio
run
was that
out.
guy too. He was definitely that guy. He didn't want to leave Rainbow.
Let,
But
let
he
me
didn't
ask
want.
you. Let me ask you a question then. If that let's since we're in this alternate universe, let's explore for a minute. Let's say that Ronnie James Dio stays with Black Sabbath. Does Black Sabbath begin to have the same or continue the success that they had at the beginning of it and actually eclipse Ozzy and
No,
Ozzy's solo work?
no, I don't think they do that. But I think that they definitely ride the whole '80s with platinum albums and rival
oh
what
yeah,
Ozzy's doing.
yeah. Because Dio's band, in a lot of ways, was more modern and had that edge, a different edge than Sabbath. That was more modern, and he had his own pyrotechnic guitarist and Vivian Campbell. Holy Diver and Last in Line, in my opinion, are metal statements. You know what I'm saying?
And those are both platinum albums.
But you
Oh
want
yeah.
to talk about originators of rock and roll, though? Ronnie James Dio was in a fucking doo wop
He
band
was in
back
the
in the
doo wop
late
band.
50s.
That's right. I have an album of Elf. I have the album Elf.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
Yep.
yeah. That's actually it's rock and roll, but it's kind of throwback rock and roll. He's got the ding 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 piano like from the '50s.
Yeah.
But that was early 70s, and that's really what started putting him on the map.
Yeah, but he was early '60s too. He there's a couple singles that he was on throughout the '60s with greaseback hair and stuff like that.
Yep.
They
Completely different scene. I mean, completely different scene than what we saw from him in Black Sabbath in the early '80s.
you know what
And then,
killed
of
Black
course,
Sabbath with Dio was the release uh, of Speak of the Devil and Live Evil at the same time. And the problem with Live Evil was the production was horrible. It's too bassy, and it just didn't sound good. Whereas Speak of the Devil was an over the top sounding live album that had been heavily processed and redubbed in the studio, right? So
yeah.
it was slick. It felt like, even though it wasn't Randy Rhoads, it was Brad Gillis. It felt slick and modern. And it just on your. It just Live Evil just didn't sound good, which is awful because it had a great set list on it and could start.
Well, and you know, this right here could be another podcast for another day too. But truthfully, that's where they came to blows. It was actually Dio left the band before Live Evil came out.
Mm.
Because
There were fights over that. Dio was trying to come in and do some mixing on it, and Ami basically comes in one day and says, "You're done. You don't do any mixing. I'll be doing the fucking mixing." And the product you hear is what Ami
Do
came
you
up
think
with.
that he might have had a little bit of white on his mustache there when he was making that pronouncement?
Oh, absolutely. Dio said that,
Absolutely.
and that's another thing. He could not deal with those guys because they were on drugs so bad that
Oh yeah.
you could not use logic in your conversations.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dio was very logical. He was a spiritual guy, man. He was deep. I mean, if you couldn't, get deep with him, he didn't like it. That's why he was better off on his own. And even though those are two of the greatest metal albums of all time, in my opinion, top 25 anyway, Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, the stuff that he was able to do solo, he could go deeper than that if he
Yep.
wanted to. And really, the best stuff he ever did, if you ask me, for Dio, the power of it, the majesty of it, was Stargazer with Rainbow. To me, that's
Absolutely. That's an awesome song.
oh yeah, it's unbelievable, man. I mean, that's see, metal went in two directions, right before the '80s, right? And Rainbow was one direction with keyboards and so forth, right? And it would have kept on rocking, in my opinion, had they not went back to Deep Purple, right? So
Right.
so Deep Purple comes out, it's pretty much the same thing as Rainbow with better keyboard player Ian Gillan, and it was a great reunion. But in my opinion, if Dio had kept rocking, Dio didn't want to compromise on his musical principles and stuff like that. He didn't want to do a bunch of pop, and Richie Blackmore wanted to do pop, so he goes to Black Sabbath. But he gets there, he thinks it's a serious band. He transforms the band and makes it better than the last 2 or 3 Ozzy Black Sabbath albums. So he gets there.
Ozzy had hit rock fucking bottom.
Oh yeah,
He really had.
In my opinion, Never Say Die, and
He hit bottom so bad that he wound up marrying Sharon.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's go ahead and announce it. That's coming. It's got to be coming in the next month or so. Is we got to do a Sharon Osbourne episode.
Oh yeah, we got.
Oh
to.
man, we can sit and talk for hours just on people that she's interacted with. She is
that are still trying to get their money.
Either still trying to get their money or still trying to get some kind of satisfaction after she was able to pull a fast one on them and pretty much tell them, well, what are you going to do about it?
I believe for 20 years that Tommy Aldridge was the drummer on Diary of a Madman.
Oh, he's not, is he?
No, it's Lee Kerslake, but he's got the credit on it. I've got the original album that I bought in 1982. I can pull it out and look at it right now. It says Tommy Aldridge and Rudy Sarzo when it was Lee Kerslake and Bob Daisley.
Yep.
That sounds like a lawsuit. Somebody got a lawsuit and they got that.
Nobody ever is able to pull this shit off in court.
Well,
She's well prepared when she goes to court.
And what they did was they released a new CD of Diary of a Madman, right, that had Mike Borden and the Trujillo and as playing the parts, and they mixed it over the original Randy Rhoads guitars and the original vocals, right? And then they released it for about 10 years at Walmart. The one that had a little tiny picture of Diary of a Madman in the middle, and the outside of it was green and said, "Oh, right." So they sold that, and they sold that for 10 years with it trying to cut them out of getting their money. In other words, by having Mike Borden and Trujillo, who is now the bassist of Metallica, on there and remixing with them playing those parts. So the people like me were outraged, right? Because in my opinion, Diary of a Madman is the greatest metal album ever made, period. Mm-hmm. Right? And to me, it's sacrosanct and they should have never touched it. But they eventually re-released it in its original glory. So.
You are listening to the Balls Out Podcast. Make sure to give us a thumbs up, comment, Share and subscribe so that you can help this podcast grow.
We might as well jump into eventually what we came here to talk about, and that is this pitiful Mick Mars Motley Crue fiasco.
Oh my God! Now I guess we need to go ahead and get it out on the table. I think everyone here is pretty much Team Mick Mars.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like Nikki Sixx. I haven't liked him for a while. Just listening to him. I mean, Nikki Sixx is a blow. I don't know. I'm not going to get into all this of why I don't like Nikki Sixx. It's just years of listening.
No, it's
the
time to
shit
get
he
it
says.
out, Doug. It's time to get it out. It's time to go ahead and put it out on the table. Fuck
I
Nikki
I
Sixx.
listened to him tell the story about when he overdosed, or come close to
Kickstart my
dying.
heart. Yeah.
And he loves telling the story, and you can just tell that he's so proud that it happened. You can. He like he said, his heroes had all died from that, and he just really loves the fact that he almost died from that. And I don't know. It's just that's what I get out of him.
He's
That's
so
the type
shallow,
of guy.
he's so shallow. He don't have anything to talk about yet. He's got to do it for 10 years. So what do? You make up beefs. You screw over your old bandmates and stuff like that. So you could be about you and him. That's why I've never listened to Dee Snider. Right? Dee Snider. If you want to hear a guy talk rock and roll and spin some records, but Nikki Sixx's show, after a while, I was like, wow, it's so about him, and I'm not really a fan like that, right?
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that because I've actually listened to that podcast or the radio
6 a.m.
show that he does. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a hard pass for me, man. It really is set up. It's set up in such a way that it's not like. Have you ever heard Bob Dylan's podcast or the podcast that Bob Dylan's put together when he does that? Man, it is amazing, and it really is. It's a celebration of the music that he's playing. When Nikki Sixx is playing, it's Nikki Sixx playing songs, and everything is focused about Nikki or the conversations about Nikki or Nikki's viewpoints on this, or it doesn't absorb itself into the show that he's creating. The show is him. And so I've always been, and I just happened to be driving somewhere and tuned in. I may have been in a vehicle that had XM or something like that. I can't remember, but it just, I listened to it for a little while just because I like some of the music he was playing, but the breaks in between the music, I mean, it was some of the worst DJing you could possibly imagine. And this is somebody that. I did it for a very, very short period of time and know a lot of people that work in that industry that put together radio shows of all kinds, not just music or not just, talk shows or podcasts or this, that, and the other. But there's a really, I don't know, there's just something very vacant and missing there when you listen to it. And that's just his podcast. I'm going to tell you what, I'm struggling to think of the last, other than, Dr. Feelgood. I can't remember the last time I bought a Motley Crue album.
I got to say, it's
been a long time.
The last Motley Crue album I bought was Theater of Pain, and I was not happy with it. The last album that I bought that I loved was Shout at the Devil.
Oh man, that is still a classic album. That is, you cannot take that album away from them.
I think Too Fast for Love is definitely more influential album.
Too Fast for Love I really enjoy it, and I think it's just harder edge, more punkish, and I love Piece of Your Action though. That's the quintessential hair band. That's the birth of hair band.
It really is kind of a punk metal hybrid.
Oh
But
yeah.
they were able to do it right though when they first broke it up. Because again, you had a lot of hair metal guys came after that never really captured that grime and that sleaze. I want to say probably the only other band that did it successfully may have been Guns N' Roses.
Rad, I think. But if you go back to Shout the Devil,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Rat, man. God, can never overlook Rat.
but if you go back to Shout at the Devil, right? On Shout at the Devil, they focused in on being purely metal, and it's a metal statement. It's one of the metal statements of the 80s, right? I mean, there's no compromises on Shout at the Devil. There's no ballads except to Satan, right? God bless the children of the beast, right? I mean, you understand what
So,
I'm
so
saying?
while we were on this subject, and back to Nikki Sixx for a minute, and I really don't know how much truth is in this, but I've been hearing it my whole life. Nikki Sixx was a guy. He'd jump on a guitar, he'd hit a single note, put a melody down, write some lyrics, but he didn't really have a song. When I say that, he had a structure, but it wasn't riffs or anything. It was just duh, some vocals, duh. Mick Mars come in and crafted that stuff. I've always heard this, and not only that, but Nikki Sixx's bass lines in the early albums were typically recut by Mick Mars before they would mix because he was not a good bass player.
It was more about him being a star and looking good and being popular, right?
And he did eventually, after touring a little bit, keeping his volume down and just having a low hum thing going there. And Mick Mars was an incredible guitar player, was able to kind of carry everything. Eventually, Nicky got to where he could play a little bit.
Now, see,
that's the narrative I've heard my whole life. And if anybody's
that.
heard anything that contradicts that, let's hear it, because I really don't know that that's actually true. But I have heard it my whole life.
Marketed, right? Because they look good and they fit this new era, and they were marketed just like the Beatles and Kiss were marketed, right? Where individual members were cool, and all that. I mean, so they were heavily marketed, and so when they came out with Home Sweet Home, and then MTV pushed it so hard, it was a little bit.
What teenage girl did not clutch her pillow to that song when it dropped? Oh my God! That song right there got all the girls in my neighborhood stirred. You put that one on, and there's a good chance you got the finger bang.
Oh, they got excited.
Oh yeah.
Rat though was, to me, you go back to the sleaze. I love the sleaze of Rat. I mean, they just felt like they were the next party thing after Van Halen. They wasn't quite as good as Van Halen, and they were different from Motley Crue, but I really enjoyed Rat. It just seemed to me like the 80s party, you know what I'm saying? They were just the MCs. So, but I don't know. I guess Motley Crue's bigger than Rat in the whole scheme of things, probably. But back to Nikki Sixx and Mick Mars. So a lot of this is really about business. So what Mick Mars wants is, even though he can't play, Motley Crue is a corporation, and he wants to get his 25% cut of him being on the road, whether he goes on the road or not. So Mick Mars, that's the sticking point, really, is that Mick Mars wants a 25% cut that he is on paper is due him, and Nikki Sixx don't want him to get it.
Well, see, I think, just like any great attorney, I think they're probably highballing a little bit. They know Mick is probably not going to get 25%, but he did help build this brand into what it is now. Oh, so he definitely it's definitely worth more than, what are they getting, 5%?
Oh, is he getting? Offering?
It's really low. It is a percentage, but it's very low. So my guess is that Mick's attorney probably trying to get 20, maybe 15%.
Yeah, I can see that too. I'd like to see him get something, since he's the owner of the corporation on paper. So, on the other hand, it makes me think of baseball in the 70s. If you couldn't play, you didn't get paid, right? Because they gave out game checks, right? So that's probably what their mindset is. But I don't know if that's the most loyal thing. But I would negotiate something with him, since he's the brand. Now, John 5, you got to pay him too, right? So that means it's paid. I mean, he's not just some session guitarist they come out of the woodwork with,
No, he's recording with them right now, from what I understand.
See, that's interesting, because the deal that Mick Mars proposed was that he continue to do the recording and then somebody else would do the touring, right? So that means they're trying to cut him out all the way around. So if you make a new album and reincorporate Motley Crue without Mick Mars, then he wouldn't
Well,
be.
and again, I mean, you also have to look at it from the other perspective, something that nobody's bringing up. John Five just left Rob Zombie to join up with, and Rob Zombie is consistently touring, consistently putting out music, is keeping him busy. And it was an amicable parting, but Rob was kind of gritting his teeth a little bit. He wasn't happy about it because he's losing one of the best, I guess, probably one of the best session guitar players in the business right now for that particular genre.
Oh, he's amazing.
For heavier rock music. Oh, and there's not much you can't put in front of him that he can't play. He's a big. A friend of mine met him years ago when he played at the music hall, and I think it was him in some little project, but I think he was pretty much the marquee name for the project that he put together. And so he was performing under John Five, and a dude got a chance to talk with him a little bit. It was either before or after the show, and was just blown away at how just centered of a human being he was. Number one, and number two, he started like pulling out demo CDs of like country songs and other, I mean, just completely outside of his normal genre, and discussing with him about bluegrass and all sorts of stuff. So he is very extremely well versed in all types of music. So I don't think there's much you can put down in front of him that he can play. So a guy like that is in high demand.
Oh yeah.
And when you have a band like Motley Crue, which is an established, one of those just, too good to be true gigs comes up, particularly when they're in their last legs, and so there's a guaranteed crowd at every show. Who wouldn't jump at that opportunity?
Now, do you think
if you're going to go to that opportunity, here's the point I'm trying to make. If you're going to embrace that opportunity and walk away from a full-time project from a very well-established act in its own right, there needs to be a carrot or two there, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to play with you guys, but, man, I mean, if you want to bring me into this thing, then you need to bring me into this thing. Otherwise, I don't know, Rob's going to call, and I might go and tour with him next year.
Yeah.
So now, and it's, and he has shot by, all accounts in the Motley Crue camp, from what little bit I've read on it. Everybody is completely just blown away by how much enthusiasm and energy that he's injected into the project, which kind of reinforces what we're talking about, because if it took the replacing Mick Mars to give them a new shot, in a new direction to go in, well, yeah, maybe that was a pretty important loss that they just lost and needed somebody to help keep them afloat and keep doing all of the things that a musically knowledgeable fellow like Mick Mars was doing.
Well, this reminds me of something else. As far as Mick Mars goes, rumor has it is they've been trying to get rid of Mick Mars for a long time.
Yeah. And again, I would imagine due to his health problems, that
he's
definitely cuts into their rock and roll image and rock and roll lifestyle backstage. In addition to extra costs that having to keep a doctor on staff, things like that.
10 years older than the other guy, so even right out of the gate, his age was actually a plus. But at the same time, he was a lot different than they were. He really wasn't a partier. He never has been, and probably health issues with some of that. But yeah, I've heard rumors that they tried to get him out even in the 80s.
I've heard stuff like that too. They had serious problems, and they needed some serious ankles. I mean, when you're 100-mile-an-hour car wrecks and killing your bodies and stuff like that, somebody's got to help you get a grip,
Well, and you're talking about, again, the anchor of the band. So they would have gotten rid of him in the 80s, and then who would have been around to make the magic happen, the studio magic happen for their roar back to the charts with Dr. Feelgood.
They'd probably had to have George Lynch or somebody like that.
Well, the rumor that popped up one time is that they were actually wanting Jakey Lee.
Oh yeah.
And that didn't end up happening. Mick Mars never would let go. I mean, once they laid down the contracts and the partnership, Mick Mars was not willing to let go of his part, and I don't blame him.
No, he saw a gold mine that he helped break open. So I mean, yeah, I get his position, but then again, we have to look on the other side of the coin here. There have been precedences where people were band members that were very vital and important to the band had to step away for some reason or another, and give them a pat on the back, and they get all the royalties from the songs that they did in the years past. But I don't see, even with John Five on the guitar, I don't see Motley Crue roaring back to the charts in this day and age. I just don't.
No, that's never going to happen. But they will still be able to go and make money playing live.
Oh, absolutely, man. Especially worldwide. I mean, not just America. Particularly anywhere south of the border, they're going to do extremely well.
Here's an interesting tidbit: is I was looking last night. I was looking at their net worths, all of them, and it's never the way you expect it. It's like the most productive guy in the band typically don't have the highest net worth because everybody's spending habits are different, and we know that Nicky has spent a lot of fucking money in his life. But Mick Mars and Tommy Lee are tied as the wealthiest of the members.
Tommy Lee also has a lot of other situations outside of Motley Crue tied to Hollywood and his presence in Hollywood that is kind of giving him an extra revenue stream that the other guys haven't been able to enjoy. Vince Neil, I think maybe didn't Vince have some kind of reality show or something at one point in time?
He did, but him and Nicky are the most. They probably blow the most money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But now Mick Mars, we know why he is tied for the wealthiest guy in Motley Crue
because he didn't spend all of it.
He didn't party, right?
No, he was fighting for his life most of the time, so I'm sure that kind of kept him pretty conservative and eating good and meditating, that sort of thing. While the other guys are, blowing.
Yeah, they definitely had enough.
Snicker's ass.
They definitely had enough money. The band did to just hire a genuine Indian guru, just like the Beatles did.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't think they did, but
you go to these big festivals, especially, but in general, you go to shows these days, and they're so tightly formatted and so well rehearsed. You never see stuff like you see in the 70s where like a guitarist would get off and they just go off on a tangent and get lost in it. They'd go on for 10 minutes and shit like that. And they
that was acid. That was definitely hallucinogenic.
Oh yeah, we're talking like Robin Trower.
Y'all had much better acid back then.